In this video, we're going to be showing you 6 pickleball shots that we guarantee will make you a better player and help you win more games. We know these shots will help you be a better player because these are the exact shots that when Kyle and I implemented these into our game, took us overnight from 3.0 players to 4.0 players. But you'll just want to make sure to watch to the end of this video because the last 2 tips are the ones that have made the biggest difference in both of our games.
All right, let's dive into the first shot that we're going to talk about. The drive. Hitting drives is a good shot to use against less experienced players. Using drives against more experienced players, you can't always rely on them because they can usually return them pretty well. That's why we're going to show you the third shot drop later in this video, so make sure to stay tuned. So what is a drive? Typically a drive is when the ball is returned back to me, I'm hitting it hard, usually with topspin, right back at him. And here's what that looks like. In that case, as you can see, it's top spun over the net and it's a hard shot typically to keep your opponent back. A good way to use a drive in singles is to hit a passing shot. I'm gonna hit a serve to Adam. He's gonna return it and try and get up to that kitchen line. I'm gonna hit it down the right side past him, looking to hit the lines, either the left line or that right line. Another way to use a drive is to hit the ball at your opponent's feet when they're in transition coming up to the net. This can be used in singles or doubles. In doubles, a good way to use the drive is to hit the ball directly down that center line, especially when the opponents are both up on the net. That'll usually confuse them and maybe catch them off balance. The drive is your power move, but it is easy to miss hit if your form is off. Want to focus on a smooth weight transfer, low to high swing, adding that top spin so that you can still have that power, but also keep it within the court because that spin's bringing it back down.
All right, so now that you've learned about hitting a drive, we can talk about hitting a drop shot. And the drop shot is another really good option to move from the baseline up to the kitchen, especially in a doubles match where after you serve to your opponent and they return it, most likely they're going to start breaking towards the kitchen. So you want to make sure that you hit a good third shot that's going to allow you the opportunity to move up. In some cases, you want to use the drive. In other cases, this is a good opportunity to go ahead and execute a drop shot. So what is a drop shot? A drop shot is when you actually lightly strike the ball so it peaks and has a higher arc and barely gets over the net, allowing your opponents to not be able to attack it. And you can either implement this on your third shot or you can implement it on your 5th shot if you chose to drive on your 3rd shot. Okay, so now how do you actually hit a drop shot? I recommend for most righties to have their left foot forward in kind of a split stance. If you're a lefty, obviously you put your right foot forward like so. But I recommend this because as you're coming through with the paddle, it's going to give you just a longer range as opposed to if you were standing like this, there's just more margin for error. So you can actually have a longer range of the paddle through the zone and just kind of keep your head behind the paddle longer. Another thing to keep in mind when hitting the drop shot is it can be really challenging. At first, you're going to pop a lot up to your opponents, allowing them to attack it. But you just kind of have to really practice this shot a lot to get it able to implement into your games. And the one big kind of mental cue for me that really helped me implement this shot is just to visualize like I'm tossing the ball over the net. So all I'll do is when just first starting out to try and feel this shot and practice it is I would just take the ball and I would just toss it lightly over the net. So now after you probably toss a couple over the net, have an idea for the power that you need to provide, you'll just take that paddle. Obviously, if you'll be practicing with someone, or you can just toss them up to yourself to practice these to get the feel down. But what you'll do is just almost like you're just throwing the ball over the net. Okay, 2 more points to keep in mind when executing the drop shot is to take kind of the wrist out of the equation and pretty much your arm in general and just really feel like you're swinging from the body and your shoulders. And this will allow you to really control the pace of your shot. Additionally, Ben Johns, one of the top players in the world, actually recommends to strike the ball on its way down. So in tennis, if you played tennis before, usually you're wanting to strike the ball after it bounces on its way up. But when you're performing the drop shot, what you want to do is actually strike the ball after it bounces and then starts to come down. So I'll show you an example of that here. So here's an example of a third shot drop. I'm serving it to Kyle. He's going to return it. And now I'll use the drop to get up to the kitchen and get into the point and have an advantage here. But for a player looking to improve, just getting up to the net and getting up to the kitchen isn't going to allow you to win more points if you don't know what to do once you get there. Therefore, we're going to teach you now how to take advantage of your court positioning with some basic volley skills. So there's a lot that goes into volleying, and there's a lot of different types of shots you can hit at the net. We're going to cover probably 2 of the most common ones and the ones that'll have the biggest benefit for you. But we're definitely going to cover this more in depth in other videos, so make sure to subscribe for that. But we're going to get into a good system here just for starting out and learning to control the net without overcomplicating things. All right, so at the net, the first thing is just going to be to get an athletic stance so you can react quickly, right? You always want to be ready at the net for the ball to come back at you. The next thing I tell people is to get the paddle above the elbow, right? If the paddle's below the elbow, you're going to get some awkward shots and pop the ball up to your opponent. So keep the paddle above the elbow, and this allows you to just kind of attack through and down on the ball right back at your opponent. If you have a loose wrist, the paddle angle is going to change. It's going to cause issues. You're going to spray the ball all over the place. So keep the wrist stiff. Swing from upper body rotation if you have time, and then also maintain the same grip if you transition to a forehand versus a backhand. You want to make sure you have a comfortable grip for both, because you're not going to have time to switch your grip at the net. So here's a couple examples of just keeping that paddle up, kind of facing in between the backhand and forehand. You don't want to cheat too much one way or the other unless you're really advanced, because it's going to be hard to transition to the other way. So I like to start in the middle for most beginners, and then just kind of, you can transition to the other way as needed. So a good way to practice volleying is just to kind of lightly volley it back and forth with a partner. Just kind of get a feel for the different angles, switching between backhand and forehand, and just maintain that athletic stance. Keep that wrist stiff. Okay, so now that you know how to come up to the kitchen, hit a ball above the waist, and keep your opponent on defense, the next thing you're going to need to do is defend the third shot drop or just a weak dink from your opponent. So this is going to be great if you know how to use a forehand or backhand roll. And the forehand or backhand roll is going to allow you to hit a ball kind of at your waist or below your waist, and use top spin to still attack that ball and then have it spin back into the court. All right, so as an example here of the forehand or backhand roll, I'm just having Kyle start back in the court, and I'm going to start up at the kitchen, and he's going to try and hit drop shots, and I'm going to try and use the forehand or backhand roll to keep him back there and not allow him to come up to the kitchen. So here you go. He's going to hit a drop shot. I'm able to roll that and keep him back. It's important to know you could still hit the forehand roll on a ball that bounces.
All right, now let's get into two of the most important shots that had the most impact on our games. First shot is a strong backhand. Having a strong backhand will save you from having to get around the ball every single time just to set up a forehand. There are two common styles of backhands. You have the two-handed backhand, and then you have the single-handed backhand. The two-handed backhand is not only a reliable way to put control on your shot, but to also add some power. I personally use them for my backhand drives. When hitting the two-handed backhand, it's recommended that you have a paddle that has at least 5.5 inches of handle so you can get enough room for those two hands. Biggest thing is having that left hand behind right here, and it's guiding that paddle forward, almost as if you are hitting a forehand topspin ball, except just on the backhand side. Now that we've covered the two-handed backhand, let's dive into a single-hand backhand. The single-hand backhand can be as effective for drives as a two-handed backhand. For the most part, single-hand backhands are used for volleys and dinks. In the end, it really comes down to your preference on what you like to use for volleys, for drives, or for dinks. So use what's most comfortable for you.
All right, now let's get into the most important shot that has had the biggest impact on Kyle and I's games, and that's going to be dinks. You've probably heard of dinks before, but they are very important to mastering your game. So let's get into why we dink. So we dink because it allows us to not attack a ball that would put us in a compromised position. Like for example here, if Kyle hits me a dink like this, I try to attack it and I hit it into the net. So when hitting a dink, after you strike it, you're going to want the highest point or the vertex of the ball to be about a foot before the net. You don't want it to reach its highest point after the net, because that'll allow Kyle to attack it. So here's a couple examples of a dink that bounces a foot before the net. Here we set the highest point right there, highest point right before the net, highest point right before the net, highest point right before the net. All right, so when dinking, you're going to want to make sure to set your feet early. You can see if I get lazy, set my feet late, it's just harder to dink. So I'm just going to want to set my feet early, and it allows me to really just keep my head still and hit a controlled shot. The next thing in dinking is just always make sure you're looking for an attackable ball. So always being ready, and you get an opportunity to attack. The best way to attack a dink is to feel like you're catching the ball as far out in front as possible, because then if Kyle were to leave one up, I'm out and ready for it. So most beginners when dinking will use a lot of wrist. It's kind of similar to the drop shot. You almost want to think as if you're just moving that paddle as if you're going to toss the ball lightly over the net. Once you try and feel like you're tossing the ball, if you're still having trouble getting your dinks to land in the kitchen and they're getting attacked, I recommend just dinking at an angle, because this is going to if you do pop it up, give the ball more space to land in the kitchen. But really the whole point of dinking is just to set up your partner for, or your opponent for a mistake, right? So I can just work down the line, see if I can just find a weakness in someone's game, whether it's the backhand dink and a lot of beginners, to find a way to get an attackable ball.
All right, those are the 6 shots that brought us from a 3.0 level to a 4.0 level in less than a month. But we didn't talk about serving, which also made a huge difference in our game. So make sure to click that video on the screen to learn about serving. And peace out, guys.